Hey, this is Idea Coaches for Coaches from. We're on the weight classes preview to UFC 200. All right. So in the last video, I talked about how the UFC has difficulty making stars, and now we have Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 2, supposed to be one of the main fights for UFC 200. A lot of problems with this. I really don't know exactly where the UFC wants to go with this fight. If Conor McGregor ends up being Nate Diaz, what does that do for him? What would he then have to fight in the welterweight division? I mean, they was fighting at 170, and the stipulation was if Conor McGregor was to beat Nate Diaz, he would then fight Robbie Lawler for the welterweight belt, completely skipping RDA, the lightweight champion. Is that going to happen again? Is he just going to skip a weight class? I feel that the UFC and Conor McGregor are very aware that since the IB ban, it's very doubtful that Conor McGregor can make 145 pounds and be effective anymore. It's got a lucky shot, skill, stars coming into a line together with the 13-second knockout of Jose Aldo. I didn't like Jose Aldo's comments after McGregor lost. Didn't look very professional to me. He ended up being one of the stereotypical Brazilians who makes excuses when they lose. I did not like how he came across and handled himself, especially when he was offered the fight earlier than Nate Diaz. UFC has this thing right now over the past couple of years where they really want to promote pretty much the Aryan fighter, where it can be Alexander Gustafsson, who cannot win the big fight for the life of him. There was Paige, who everyone says she had a great heart because she, went 5 rounds, well, close to a full completion of 5 rounds, and then gave up at the very, very end. That bitch is on fucking Dance with the Stars these days. Don't expect to see her in the cage getting her face messed up anytime soon again. Then there's Sage Northcutt. This guy who had these docile eyes, this crazy physique body that just screams suspicions of, performance enhancers, who, in my opinion, was actually giving people who were paid to dive on the fight. If you ever see UFC's embedded before Sage Northcutt UFC's debut, Dana White is talking about how they are looking for a new star. Then he fights this guy who does I would have to describe it as a front leg back hook kick, which doesn't sound even cool in your head and is, of course, not a real move. So he falls flat on his face and then just loses to Sage Northcutt in a couple of seconds. The second fight Sage Northcutt had, his ground game was exposed, but he still ended up winning the second round. And then his last fight, he ended up getting tapped out. I don't think the future's very bright for that kid. I think he would be a lot better in like some sort of like Bellator, where he probably fit that Michael Page role, where he's just fighting guys that are pretty much one-dimensional, but Sage will be better in that one dimension, and that's pulling off a lot of exciting fights and more highlight reel knockouts. I don't see this kid going too far. It's just because MMA doesn't really have a little league. You get on a 2-3 fight win streak, and people are saying that you should win the title. You should go from fight for the title, and Sage won't be there. I think Sage would have to quit MMA for like 2 or 3 years, then come back, and then maybe he has a chance of fighting for a title 2 or 3 years after his return. Ronda Rousey, a fantastic superstar, ended up showing that she's a mental midget. And I think that she's going to psychologically find a way to lose to Miesha Tate in the third fight, because she knows if she wins, she's got to fight Holly Holm. Then you have Holly Holm, who her career just didn't take off the way I think the UFC wanted. Having that women's bantamweight belt bounce around is not in the best interest for anyone. So that's another star that could have been created, but is not, and probably will not, since she lost to Miesha Tate by being choked out. So there's a lot of UFC has a very difficult time promoting fighters. I know it sounds like a broken record here, but having this rematch instead of Frankie Edgar or even a Jose Aldo, who, in my opinion, doesn't fully deserve a rematch immediately. I think Jose would be better off fighting Max Holloway, or maybe Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo should have a go around and see who's the number one contender. To me, it should have been Frankie Edgar to begin with. I don't know why they're not having this fight, but Frankie Edgar is a very dangerous fight for Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor seems to have a blueprint laid out for him on how to beat him, and I think Frankie Edgar, especially at 145, can really exploit a lot of Conor's weak points and not get tired. If Conor McGregor goes into this next fight with Nate Diaz, I mean, if Nate Diaz wins this next fight, where does Nate Diaz go? He gets a lot of money, but where does he go with this? RDA already beat him up. I can't see him beating anyone at 170 who's in the top three. So where does Nate Diaz go with this kind of fight? If I was Nate Diaz, I would have lobbied this for an RDA rematch. For some reason, they didn't do that. And now with Conor McGregor, it's like, well, where does he go? So, does he stay at lightweight? Does he give up the featherweight belt, which I don't even know that he can defend anymore with his body growing so much? I don't know if he can cut down to 145 anymore, and I think that's a huge concern, and that's why they're trying really quickly to get him out of that division. If they wanted to do that, and they should have had him fight Frankie Edgar for the featherweight belt, then he would technically clean out the division, and then he just go up, vanquish the belt, go up in weight classes, whether it be 155 or 170, more than likely 155, and fight RDA. But they're just not going to do that. So I don't know. I'm very disappointed with the headliner for UFC 200. I don't know if it's part of the headline. The headliner. Oh, geez, what is the headliner? I think the card is still being made. I don't know which card is going to be, what fight is going to be the headliner. But anything with Conor McGregor is at least going to be the co-headliner. So very disappointed with this main event. Off to some other news regarding Hulk Hogan. I'm very glad that he has won his $115 million from the Gawker sex case scandal. For those who don't know, Hulk Hogan made a sex tape. It was released and distributed by without his consent, and he made a whole lot of money from it. For another person, I would not agree to this amount of money, but Hulk Hogan's whole career was being a lovable guy to children. And if it's not to children, it's to the grown adults, and appealing to the nostalgic idea of your childhood, especially for anyone born, in the 70s through maybe early 90s. Hulk Hogan was really the man for a very long time. So having this kind of event take place in his life, considering who he is actually very detrimental. And it's so sad in a way that, like, Hulk Hogan's entire existence is a parody of his own existence. I couldn't help but laugh when Hulk Hogan was under oath talking about how Terry Bollea's dick size is different than Hulk Hogan's penis size. And Terry Bollea is Hulk Hogan's real name. He is so much into the persona that it's sometimes very hard to separate the two. For those who are a little bit more into wrestling and whatnot, like I am, or I was, I should say, it's a thing where when you bring up the name Hulk Hogan, it's kind of like, there's such a double-edged sword. A lot of people didn't like him. Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, Roddy Piper, and they died. And then he goes on these interviews after these people's deaths, talking about how, like, they made up, days before their death and stuff like that. He's such a hack for himself. And in some ways, it's kind of admirable. I just really hope that they decide to give Hulk Hogan the $115 million and not Terry Bollea. So I know I just had to speak on that because I'm very happy that Hulk Hogan is not going to be one of these wrestlers from the 80s who are either dead or committed suicide or have some sort of drug problem or anything like that. And I was very concerned that the way his life is going, especially with the WWE pretty much axed him out of existence, that's where he would be. And I would hate to have that happen to one of my heroes of my childhood. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Guys, take care.